Welcome to another edition of Tech Bytes. Really excited for you guys to join me. I'm really excited that we are getting toward the end here. We're going to deploy, we're going to do some more cool things. But today is deploying on Linux. So let me just kind of recap for those of you guys who have not been joining us to kind of know what we have done thus far. We have created a Lex chatbot. Live, we have created the Lambda function that runs in that chatbot, and we debugged it live. After we debugged that Lambda function, we tied it to our Lex chatbot. This is all using C#, and then we actually deployed it on Windows. And so today we're actually taking that MVC ASP.NET Core application with Linux running on Linux today, and we're going to deploy it once together. We're actually going to do it, so not just once, together. Nikki should be out there moderating. Nikki, are you out there? I really hope so. Moderating and helping you guys out. If you have more questions, this is what we're going to do. So let's get started. We only have 30 minutes. This is called Tech Bytes for a reason. I can't talk today. No worries. Okay. So if you joined us last time, like I said, you remember us deploying on Windows. So let me just kind of really quickly switch over to Visual Studio so that you can actually see the application running. So you can see what the actual application that we have and it's running. So this is the application. Let me just quickly run it for you. We're going to change this to, let's say we'll run in Firefox. And I'm going to actually run this. So I'm just going to hit run and let it do its thing so you can see the application that we're going to deploy. Just to make sure that, you guys are really familiar with, the application and what we're deploying in this Lex chatbot. So it is going to deploy our chatbot, and then we're going to show you how to use CodeStar to build a CI/CD pipeline to deploy this application, as slow as it wants to be, to deploy this application actually live. So here's the chatbot that we have. This is running locally. We're going to take this chatbot and we're going to run it live. So this is the orders flowers that we built together, and see it's running. All right, now let's go into CodeStar. So with CodeStar, if you guys are not familiar, CodeStar is a way to quickly get started building your CI/CD pipeline and actually deploying a sample application that you then can change to run and work as you so see fit. So what we're going to do today is live. We're actually going to take this chatbot that you see, this existing project that we've been working on here live on Tech Bytes, and we're going to deploy it to Linux using CodeStar. Before I get completely started, are there anything else that you guys are really interested in knowing and understanding about as I go through it? Please chat, and I can divert and do something different based upon what you guys want to do. All right. So with that, let's do this thing. All right, so we have the create new project here. So I'm going to actually create a new project. We obviously are using C# for this. So in using C#, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the ASP.NET project, ASP.NET Core project. I'm going to name this project because we're doing this live and we're going to deploy this. So let's do our Lex Twitch chatbot. That'll be our name. Let's see, that's kind of, well, I guess we don't care about the project ID. This is me being whatever, so I'm going to leave it like that. Let's check. I wanted to say bot though. How about this? How about I just say bot? There we go. So our Lex Twitch bot. I'm actually going to use a AWS code commit. So remember, we're building our CI/CD pipeline with this, and we're building it all the way from our source. If you've ever gone to any of my talks about CI/CD, you start with source, and then you go to build, then deploy, and then monitor. So we are going to actually have our source in our CI/CD pipeline tied to code commit. However, you do see that you can obviously have your code tied to GitHub, which is absolutely fine as well. All right, so I'm going to hit next here. And this shows you the main phases of a CI/CD pipeline, or if you're doing continuous integration or deployment: source, build, test, deploy, and monitoring. So you'll see that our source is going to come from code commit. Our code build is going to be where we do our build and test. This is actually going to deploy the EC2, as you saw. And then we're going to deploy this using code deploy, and it's going to then deploy ASP.NET on Kestrel using CloudWatch. And so at this point, I'm going to create the project. Now, you know, if you've done anything with EC2, that you need to make sure to secure it, and also to then be able to SSH in your box, you need to make sure you have your key pair. So I have some existing key pairs already that I use quite frequently. So I'm going to use my Terra demo key pair. I acknowledge that I have access to this private key file, because if I don't, I'm in a world of trouble, because then I won't be able to SSH into my box. So make sure you have access to it locally. And then I'm going to create this project, and you're going to see that at this point it's starting to set up the template. It's creating my repository, and this is where I have the option to pick how I want to edit my code. Now I'm going to do this with Visual Studio, so I'm just going to skip this part. But what I will do is, I see that it already has started, it has already created my Git code repository for this. And because of that, I'm going to go ahead and just copy that. And while it's creating my project, we can go ahead and get our, we can get the code down and start. So you'll see it'll start setting up the project and the like, and go from there. Okay, so while this is setting up the project, we won't sit there and, you know, watch that. A cooked pot never boils, as at least my mom and them used to say. So let's actually go back here and actually take this initial project. So if you're not familiar, once again, ColdStar actually builds a sample project for you so that you can actually see it running. So what I'll do, while I know that my environment is set up that has the code already and it's deployed it because I got that link, let's go ahead and clone this. And actually I'll make a directory just for this, Twitch Linux, and then I'll just go into that. All right, so let's go ahead and clone this initial project that we have. Now remember, I copied that link from ColdStar code commit when it created it for me. The one thing you need to know about code commit, if you're not familiar, is that you need to have your Git credentials tied to your IAM user. And when you, to just simply to do that, whatever IAM user you're using, because I know you're not using root, because that is a bad thing to do. So whatever IAM user that you're actually using, you would go in and have the IAM user generate Git credentials for you to be able to SSH into the box, or use HTTPS with Git. So I've already done that. So you'll see when I hit this Twitch, when I hit this, it'll ask me, and I'm on Windows. On Linux, it'll do something a little different, but I'm on Windows. So now it's going to ask me for my Git credentials for Windows. And I obviously have this. I have it saved in a file because it's really long. So I'm just going to, from that file, I'm just going to copy my username. This is the username that is tied to my IAM role that I'm using I'm using in AWS, and then the password that it's given me. And I'm going to click OK. And like I said, if this was in Mac, you would just do it on the terminal, but here it gives you a window. No worries. So now we have the code down and available to us. So let's see, you see the Twitchbot, because that's the name of the project that we created. And let's do a clear here so we get some more real estate. So you'll see that this is the default project that it actually creates for you, that will be running. So this is, your default project. This is it running and things of that nature. Now that's cool, but we don't want to deploy this project, right? We want to deploy the actual our actual Lexbot in using ColdStar, not the one that they gave us. So let's talk about this for a minute. When ColdStar starts up, and after it starts the project, it will actually create a URL. Let's go back to ColdStar really quickly while it's thinking, so I can just show you this. So if I switch back to ColdStar, let's get that going. I think it has finally finished. Yes, lovely. You'll see that over here in CodeStar, I have my repository. I have my where I can add a wiki page, etc., etc. If you're not familiar, and you see that right now, it is going through the pipeline where it is picking up the source, and it actually is using that source and I just cloned, and it actually is processing that, and it's going to pass that on to the build stage. So you'll see that in this dashboard, I see that here's my commit history. The commit made during project creation is actually now deploying that source. What you also should see from this is that a code pipeline is actually what is going to take me through those various phases of my CI/CD pipeline. So the build, the source, the build, the test, the deploy, and the monitor has been created for me. Once it is pulled that source, again, that's one. So anytime I make a commit, it is actually going to naturally immediately pick that up. And then what will happen is it'll take that source and it will then pass that to the build. So I'm impatient, waiting for the IDE to start up. So I'm just going to hit refresh because I'm impatient and I want to show you really quickly the build process happening. There you go. So the GUI started. And now what it's doing is actually taking that code build and actually deploying this initial project. So let's go quickly to code build so I can show you actually what's happening and how you can watch it. And then we're going to take this default project once it's deployed and we're going to alter it to have it be our Lexbot. So you'll see that the build is running. The build got started because the pipeline, the Twitch pipeline, had it in process. I can actually see the status of this and information. So if I want to look at the output logs of what is actually happening in CloudWatch, if I click that, it'll actually go to CloudWatch and then show me what's going on in the logs. This is a part of the monitoring. So you'll see that here it is installing the necessary framework. I'm using obviously .NET 2.0. It's 2.03 to be specific. You'll see it's entering the phase. So it actually completed the build phase, success for true. It's entering the post build, that was true. It's copying the artifacts and it's actually deploying. So that is in process right now. And it's finishing that post deploy. I told you I'm the GUI updates on its own, but I want to get through this quickly. So I am going to refresh. So now let's look at the pipeline while it's doing that. And then we're going to change this to actually look at the Twitch thing. So let me just quickly show you the pipeline. And again, if you look at this, this is a part of just best practices of using CI/CD. The minute, if I'm using continuous integration, that means the minute I do a commit to this, it should kick off this pipeline, pull that source, go ahead and build that source. You see it's in process and it's been going 2 minutes, and then it should deploy that source. So while that's working, let's go ahead and start to make some changes of what we have going on. So that's going through that and it'll finish and I'll show you the default one. But with our time, let's be efficient with it. Let's actually go now that we have this and I'll start to make some changes on this. So back to this, let's go to Visual Studio. So here's my Lex chatbot and everything else. What I want to do at this point, let me close down the rest of these files, or just close all this down. I'll just open up the new one. What I want to do at this point is I want to take those scripts that are given to me for deploy, and I actually want to utilize, I want to change them for my own. So let's open up those scripts so that you can see it. So let's see. I'm going to just go to the folder here, twitch.net repository, test deploy. And let's see, let me just say I'm not doing good with the path. Let me just find it. This path is, okay, Twitch Linux. There you go. All right, so let me open that up now that I can remember the path. So I'm going to open up my app spec YAML file. And in opening that up, let's see, I can actually alter it. So it's taking a minute to load, but here we go. All right, here is my app YAML. And this is what it's using, the pipeline using to do things like stopping the application on the server, installing, after install, and things of that nature. So what I'll do is let's go ahead and get all of these files that is associated with it open so we can make these updates. So I'm just going to go and open all of these files. So I want to open my build spec because I'm going to alter that as well. And then you see from my app spec, there's a bunch of scripts that are running. So if I'm going to do my due diligence here, I need to make sure that I'm actually going to alter those scripts appropriately for this. So we're just going to open all of those. Another thing that I'm going to do if I'm doing this right is I need to make sure I'm going to do it the lazy man way, but I just need to copy my actual application into this folder because obviously it's going to pick it up and go from there. So what I will do here then is, you'll see, let me bring this over. I'm going to actually take my application and I'm actually going to put it into this folder. So this is our folder that we're using. This is the default one. I'm just going to paste those things over. Nope. Just stop that. Okay, yeah, we're good. So continue. All the ones are there. Great. All right, so I've copied this over at this point in time. Now let's alter this so that now it looks at, instead of looking at the app, the default one that is there, it's going to look at these. And before that I do that, let me show you what the default application looks like. So you'll see back in CodeStar, this actually is finished deploying. You see it's gone through, green is good. And once it deploys this, it's going to give you an endpoint to run this. So I'm just going to click this endpoint so you can see this is the default application that is running. See, congratulations, you created an ASP.NET Core web application. So we know it's running. We know that our pipeline is running. We know our application is running. Now let's get back to, let's change this application. Instead of being this one, we actually want to change this to be ours, the one that is our Twitch chatbot. So back on this side, so I've copied that over. Now let's actually alter these scripts to look at the appropriate one. So with this, I'm going to let's move that out the way, get some more real estate. The first thing I want to do, let's go back to our build spec. Now the build spec at this point is looking at ASP.NET Core application. That is not what we want it to look at. What we want it to look at is, let me just bring this back, is our Lex chatbot application. So we actually want to change this. Instead of saying, this application, we want this to actually be our Lexbot application. So I'll just cut and paste this, a good old cut and paste, a good deployment tool. I also want to, typically we actually creates a test file to deploy this. Since I won't go through this test file, I'll just remove it, but you can keep it in, and I have a test for this that tests my application. I'll put it on the GitHub for you. But for our intensive purposes, because we want to just get to the deploy, I'm just going to update the actual application, but I will put the test that I have created in there as well. So I'm going to remove these because since we're not going to do a test, we're just going to focus on deployment in our limited time. And then obviously I'm going to change this. So now we have our build spec that is actually now pointing to the right application. Now that we have our build spec pointing to the right application, let's go back here. I know that then my app spec XAML needs to look at needs to look at that one, not the one that the default one. So I'm going to simply change this. Now I don't want it to deploy on this one, so I'm actually going to just have this say Lex web chatbot instead of the default one. Just make that lowercase. Okay, so that'll be where I want to deploy it to on the actual web server in the container. So obviously now I'm going to change these things. There's a script that has a Kestrel ASP.NET Core script. I'm actually going to change that as well. So let's go ahead and make sure all that, because so we have our app spec changed at this point. So you have your build spec change and your app spec change. What's left for me to do at this point is to really think about, now my scripts probably have to change. But this is the first step on this. You need to make sure that your app spec and build spec is actually looking at the right project. And before I go on, let me just check any questions so far. I don't see any, but just want to do a check. I've been talking a lot. You guys have not been talking a lot. So just want to make a check. Any questions so far? None. Nikki, we don't have any questions out there. Okay, no worries. All right, so let's continue on. So that since there's no questions. All right, so I have changed, obviously, my service files. Now I need to change those scripts. So I have these open. So we'll just go in order. So the first one that this source looks at is the Kestrel LexWeb chatbot service, which doesn't exist right now. The service that exists right now is the Kestrel ASP Core app service. So that's the one that is created right now. So let's change this. This will be our ASP Let's Chatbot deployed with CodeStar. Okay, so we'll just do that. Our working directory now is not going to be that ASP.NET Core. I actually want to change that to be our Lex Chatbot. Obviously, I don't want this to be this one as well. I want it to be our chatbot. And this DLL at this point, remember, is not going to be the ASP.NET one, but it's going to be our Lex Chatbot DLL. So again, just for me not being able to type, I'll just type that. So that'll be that. Restart always. I want to change this identifier as well, so that when we're debugging, it's actually looking at the right application. So I'll go ahead and change that to the LexBot Web Application Chatbot as well. So we have our Kestrel service, but it needs to be the same name as the one we're using. So let's go ahead and save this file as the right name. So I'm just going to go here and say save as. So instead of this name, because this is the old one, we're just going to have it look at the one that we're going to call from our app spec. So now we have this appropriate one, the Kestrel dash Lex Chatbot Web App Service. And that should match what we have here. So here is where we are. This now matches, as you can see, that file. Now, the next thing that we need to change to make this work is our stop service. So our service right now is running Apache service. It needs to stop the Kestrel service that you saw we just changed. So because we're going to do this the first time, I actually want this to stop that one. And because that one's the one that's running currently, I want that one to stop. So in my stop service, I'm actually going to keep that line in to make sure that one is no longer running, and that it's going to stop that one. But for future iterations, because I'm now about to deploy my Lex Chatbot, what I want this service to stop is my Lex Web Chat one. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that first line in. We can take it out later. And then I'm going to add that I want it to actually stop my Lex Web Chatbot service. So now we have the stop service is now changed to be appropriate. Now back to our app spec. So now we've changed the stop service. What about the remove application script that we have here? And you see that this is again looking at the app core one. Now I'm actually, just like I did with the other one, I want to keep that in because I actually want to remove that initial one. Initially, I want that one to go because what am I deploying? I'm deploying my chatbot. In future iterations, obviously, as I deploy new, however, I want the Lex Chatbot to be deployed new. So I'm gonna, right now, I'm gonna keep that in there. And again, we can obviously change that to be what, you know, the appropriate, we can take that first one out because it would have been removed the next time. But just again, we want that to be removed. So we're gonna keep that in because it deployed the first one. So back to our app spec, let's see, we have created our Kestrel service specifically for our chatbot. We have updated our stop service. We have updated our remove application script. Now we're going to go to install .NET Core. Now, I really don't have to do anything with this one, and that's great because I actually have this already running the appropriate one. You need to make sure that your version that you're running in your application is the same version that's installed. So I'm actually running my ASP.NET is at 2.0.3, so that works out. If not, you need to make sure you update this to have the appropriate framework as appropriate. But I'm running the same one, so I'm good there. I don't have to change that one. Back to my app spec again. So install.NET Core is good. Let's go to the HTTP, that the script that actually is going to start the HTTP service on it. So you'll see that it's going to look first and install Apache if it's not installed. It is going to run some other parts of the script specifically for our Apache service. But the main thing I need to worry about is I want to override the existing site configuration. So I don't have to keep this in here because it's going to override that default config each time and copy it over. So the only thing I need to do here is, again, I'm being very lazy with the copy and paste, but I want to get everything in. All I have to do at this install HTTP, instead of it looking at the config file, the virtual host file that is in that one, I actually wanted to look at the virtual host file that's in my Lex Chatbot. So I'll just update that there. If you want to see the virtual host, fairly simple. It's just, showing the IP address and the port that this is going to run on. So I don't really have to change that. Back to my app spec. So let's see, we're at the end of the process, and this is to be the start the service. So obviously to start the service, I don't want to start this ASP.NET service. We want to start the one I created. So I'm going to just switch this out, where it's, instead of starting the ASP.NET Core default one that you saw running, I actually want it to start the one we created, and then it's going to restart the Apache service. So if you follow along thus far, we have changed our scripts to now look at my existing application versus the application that was the default it gave you, because it wanted to give you something that is running and raring to go. Now we're actually looking at mine. So just to check, we've created a Kestrel service for our specific application. We've changed the stop service so that it is actually going to stop both of them, because right now the ASP.NET Core service is running. We wanted to stop both of them because in the future I'll be running a new one. We changed the start service, where instead of starting that default application, it starts ours. For the remove application, what is a part of the script that is running, I wanted to make sure neither one of those exists. So as I deploy, I'm deploying fresh. This is our Kestrel service, where our working directory is now looking at our Lex Chatbot versus the other one. It's actually starting the appropriate assembly versus the default assembly. And then our environment is production. You can, of course, change this to debug if you want to see more information. And I changed the syslog identifier just because I wanted to make sure when we debug, when we're looking at the monitoring, it's looking at the right one. I changed my HTTP, the file that will start my HTTP service, to actually copy the virtual host config from my Lex Chatbot. And so I think we're raring to go here. So I'm just going to save all of these files. All right. I think I have covered all of that there. So now we just need to make sure these things are running. Any questions so far? So we have changed all of our scripts to now to look at my existing chatbot CI/CD pipeline versus the one that it gave us originally. Any questions? None? You guys are super quiet. All right, so I'll keep going until you say that you have more questions. No worry. So now let's deploy this on Linux. So to do this, we're going to use our pipeline. And from our pipeline, the thing that needs to happen to have our pipeline to work is that I need to make an update of our pipeline. So let's do a get status here. You see that these are the things that have changed. Now, if we're really just doing this the right way, I probably should trash the ASP.NET Core applications, but just for time's sake, we'll leave it out there. Nothing is pointing to it at this point. So it will be in your repository. The best thing is to really make your repository clean. So remove that. Obviously, since I'm on Twitch right now with you guys, I'm not going to waste the time doing that. However, you see that I have all of these new scripts are updated, as well as the new projects that is looking at in my project. So I'm going to do a git add. I'll just do a git add a. And we'll do a status to make sure it got all of it. So you see all of the new files that have been created. Now, I actually ran this application, so you see everything is here that needs to be here. It's got all that stuff. That's great. Some of these things didn't need to be modified. The object files I could delete. But again, you guys make sure your repository is clean. I'm just not doing that right now for time's sake. But we see that it did pick up all of my changes with my chatbot file and everything else. Now that we have that, the thing for me to do now is just to commit that. So update the project file for bots and modify deployment scripts. Put my name there. Okay. So once I commit this and do a push, then my CodeStar project at this point will kick off that pipeline. So I'll just hit this, just do a status. It's nothing there. It's great. So if I look at my log, great. And it says that my it's ahead by 1. So let's rectify that by doing git push to get that to be the same. So now that we've done a git push, this is a great thing about CI/CD pipelines is I don't have to go out and do anything manually. So let's go back to our CodeStar project in our application. So what I'll do here, let's just close this down, and I'll actually look here at the CodeStar. Now, here's the thing. This GUI is just takes a minute to be refreshed, but the minute this GUI refreshes, as you see it did, the minute it refreshed and saw that it had a commit from our code commit repository, our Git repository, it said, okay, there's new code there. I need to grab that code, which is, you see immediately our pipeline kicks off, and it is now going to pull that code and go through the deployment. Let's just quickly, I'm going to show you if you see it here. So this updates from our repository, but if I actually go into code commit, you'll actually see that these are all the files that we put. So this is just the display view of what you saw when I was on the script. You'll see that at this point I have these updates that were made, and you can, just like any other Git repository, I can get a pull request. I can update my README. It kind of shows you things about this. I can look at the commits. So you see that there was the commit we made 27 minutes ago when we created this initial project, or CodeStar created this initial code. And then you see the updated project file that is here. So typical commit, you have a visualizer here where you can actually visualize the commits, and then also you can compare. So choose a destination branch, choose the right. So everything you can imagine with your Git repository is there. So once CodeStar has grabbed that source, you see the pipeline is going on to build. We're doing, as a developer at this point, I've given it my code and my pipeline, and those things are set up. And so now it's building this. And you can actually go into code build and actually see the project building and as it goes along. And I usually like to do this when I want to see where in the process it is. And I can look at my build logs here as well. So I'll just scroll down. You can see the install. It got the Cognito identity. It looked at the requirements. I have my build and the build spec and the app spec to see if these things are in line. You see that it is installing all of the libraries that are associated with my project now, which is different than what was installed originally, because remember, this had just a file that was writing out, it was just saying, hey, welcome to a new project file. But you see now that it's actually running, it's running my app spec and my build spec. So the first command is it's publishing and releasing that Lex Web chatbot. This is what we altered in our spec. And this build has been successful. So luckily I didn't fat finger anything. It actually succeeded and was completed. And again, you can look at any of these different ones and it'll tell you the time. And these are also stored, by the way, in your your CloudWatch if you want to monitor that. So we see our build has been successful. And it's probably at this point going through updating again this GUI, and then it's going to actually deploy our application. Any questions while we're looking at our this deploying? I'm going to refresh and see if it is actually picked up as yet our, yep. So now we're in deployment. So let's just go to code deploy so you can see what it actually is doing. So again, it's looking at our project. This succeeded before. This is the deployment environment that we have. If I drop this down, I can see all of the information about our deployment environment. I can see the revisions if I drop this down. So you'll see that the first revision was made when we created it. Our second revision is pulling from where it built it and has all our builds that it's going to get. So here, even if I didn't have a pipeline set up, if I wanted to just use code deploy as it is, I could literally deploy this to this bucket and come in here and say deploy revision if I so chose. But we have a pipeline set up, so I don't have to do that. Another thing you should note about the CI/CD pipeline here, and now we're actually deployed, and before I show you that, I'll quickly show you, you can create different branches. We're just doing this really quickly where I have a default branch going to production. I absolutely would suggest you come in here and edit your pipeline so that you can have different stages. So you might have source, you might have different types of build. You might have prod build, you might have debug build, etc. But you should absolutely come in here and make sure you're doing a gated deployment. I'm not going to change that right now. All right, so it says that we succeeded. Let's see if this worked the first time and we have this running. So this is our endpoint. It's connecting. And you see, we actually deployed our chatbot. You see it's actually running on EC2. Any changes that we make thus far with this can be reflected with our pipeline. And we actually did it in 38 minutes. So it's really cool. It didn't take longer than that. Just starting with CodeStar, building our code pipeline, and deploying it that way. Any questions? I mean, I'm kind of proud of myself, guys, to be honest with you, because usually things don't work the first time. So this is kind of fantastic that it did work the first time. I'm totally in awe that the demo guys were good with me. Trying to build stuff live can always be a challenge. So I'm totally shocked. There are some other things that you should know about this. Once you deploy it, again, make sure you go into, as I noted, your code pipeline and make sure you're doing a gated deployment. If we're talking about some of the best practices of DevOps here, having a gated deployment as we march toward our perfect euphoria of having continuous deployment, which we're not there yet. We have deployed, we have a continuous integration. We have, a continuous pipeline going, continuous integration, continuous deployment. We want to get to that point where we don't touch anything, where literally continuous deployment instead of just continuous delivery means anything I do, it updates me. I don't have to go back and look at the logs. I don't have to do anything test. I know it's good. We're not there yet. Even if I was doing this way, I would obviously have a gated deployment. But we are deployed. You can start with CodeStar, even with ASP.NET, which is typically not known, and have this application deployed and off the running with you. All right, any questions? We are at time. I only kept you 10 minutes later, running a little bit of my mouth. If not, I'm so glad you joined me today. Join me next time. We're gonna now enhance this bot. So we know how to deploy it. It's all done. The only thing we haven't done here, which is really exciting, is we need to add voice to this, and we need to deploy this because Lex, I don't know if you guys know this, actually has a way to export out to Alexa. So our final stages of this chatbot series will be adding voice so we can actually talk to this chatbot and actually have this bot not only running on the web, but taking this bot and exporting it to Alexa so our bot can run in both places for people who want to use this bot with Alexa and those that actually want to use this bot on the web with their voice. We'll be good with this series. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you next time. Bye, guys.